So welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for August 29th, 2018. We're going to follow our standard agenda. So the first thing on the agenda is announcements. And I think we've got some invited representatives from the foundation to give us a quick update on the JS Interactive.
Cool. Hi, we have Tracy and Lara and Greg on the call from the Node Foundation / Linux Foundation side. And maybe Lara, you can start with some event updates and then we can move from there.
Yeah, sure. We are, okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't on mute. We're tracking well for registration. We're at about 40% higher than we were last year at this time. So we're really happy with that. Any cross promotion would be greatly appreciated and drive excitement about the event from you all in terms of promoting that you're attending and or speaking at the event. I know that we're working on some Twitter cards for speakers. So this should be being sent out with the new rebrand within the next week or so. So we're just working on those. And then we have some really, I don't have a ton of updates from last week. We kind of featured some of the add-on events we are doing. I can't remember if we mentioned this, but we're doing a job fair that sponsors who are exhibiting. It will be day 2, so on Thursday morning, for those who are looking to move careers or, going from independent to joining a company. It's an open kind of job for both attendees and then an opportunity for the sponsors to do any recruitment if they have any job recs open. So that is a feature that is added from last year. And I think that, and then we have the community corner that we talked about last week as well. So we're just getting that all settled, but that will be in kind of a common space for people to stop by and get updates. And I think that is it. Tracy or Greg, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. One thing is there is still opportunity as well if your company is actually recruiting to sponsor JS Interactive. So you can always email myself, Lady Lead at Node.js.org, and we can field it to the right people. In addition to that, just to elaborate on the Node Community Corner, I did send out, I created an issue for this. And we have a few folks who are going to be helping program that content. Since this is a community focused corner. So Jem, Mateo, Waleed, Michael, Tierney, Aguirre, Joe, and Joy have all volunteered to be a part of that. So myself and Greg will be talking to everybody this Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific about the community corner. So if anybody has any questions about that related stuff, super happy to chat through it. Does anybody have any questions about Collab Summit or Community Corner or specifically JSI related stuff?
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, I was just going to add the one thing is, if there, in terms of the Community Corner, if there's anything that people think should be or would be a good addition, even if you can't necessarily contribute it yourself, it'd be good to reach out to one of the people that Tracy mentioned in terms of making that as a suggestion, because we do want to curate it so that it reflects what we think the TSC and ComCom think should actually be covered in that community corner.
Yeah, actually, another good thing to bring up, and I believe, Michael, you and I were talking about this, was the getting the working groups more involved, right? There's been so many amazing working groups. I think we're talking about the security working group giving an update, and a few others. So if you know any working group folks who might be interested or who, want to give 10 to 15 minute update or maybe even host like office hours or anything like that, all of that is great opportunity at the community corner.
Cool, thanks. I guess I only have a couple really quick ones, and then I know that there's a full agenda. So don't want to take a lot of everyone's time. So the first is, I know we all know this, and we're all trained to, because we've been calling it JSI for so long, but it is renamed. So this is Node and JS Interactive. It's a little longer, but I think it's a better name because, from the beginning, this has been an event being put on by both the Node and the JS foundations. So now the name reflects that. So it's totally normal, and I find myself saying JSI all the time. But if we can remember that the new name is Node and JS Interactive, that's a good thing. And then I do want to let you all know that I'm going to be sending out today or tomorrow the monthly newsletter from the Node Foundation, and will be highlighting in that a new panel that has just been added. It's a keynote panel, and it's really awesome. So it's already up on the agenda. You can check it out, but we've just added it. So this is going to be just enterprises talking about how they're using Node.js at massive scale. So we'll have Yunong from Netflix. We have Jessica Chan from Pinterest. We have Mike Hisks from Lowe's, the home improvement store. And then we have AD, and I'm forgetting his last name, Zibby, maybe you can help me, from Turner Broadcasting. So pretty psyched about that. And that's, I think, everything. So if anyone has any questions, you know how to reach us. But thanks for allowing us to join the call.
Okay, thank you for the update. Any other announcements that people have to share?
Franzi is waiting to be promoted.
Okay. Done. Okay, so I guess moving on to the standard agenda then. The first one on the agenda is under Node.js, Node Stream WhatWG, add WhatWG streams. Oh, sorry, I missed. No, that's the first one. Yeah, add WhatWG streams 22352.
In the issue on this, Matteo has requested it be delayed since there's a very long reply by Timothy that cannot be addressed in this memo. And also my reply, which is also quite long, which I'm sure most people have not read yet.
I would like to, I hope we do that. We postpone this, but actually what I would suggest we do is remove it from the agenda. We've talked about it. There's stuff going on. And if it needs to come back, someone can re-add the agenda label. I don't want it to auto appear every week. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, unless somebody objects.
I'm +1 with that.
Yep, agreed.
Just taking the notes in the issue. And it's issue we agreed to remove from agenda.
If someone wants to volunteer to take notes so Michael doesn't have to, that would be awesome.
I'm gonna say your keyboard sounds a little quieter there, Mike.
Maybe I'm just not pounding it quite as hard. I do have my headset on. Okay, so next one, FS feature detection for recursive makedir. This is 22302. Now I do think I saw a similar 22302. There's a question to Miles on the issue asking what was agenda to the issue with the suggestion. So Francisca has suggested it was better being discussed in the issue itself.
So in this particular one, I think the reason it was added to the agenda was because not specific to this individual issue, but there needs to be a more general conversation about how we want to do feature detection for these types of changes. So in a particular change it was made, it was an option that was added to the function. So there's no way of easily doing feature detection, like what versions of Node is this thing enabled? And it's more of a general question of how do we want to do this kind of stuff overall? so that it's not just a one-off for this one individual feature. Now we can have that conversation in a GitHub in a GitHub issue, as long as the discussion is actually had, right? So I think it was only put on the agenda just to queue up the conversation.
And this really can't land until a decision is made, right? Because, like,
Yep.
yeah. So, or rather, it's landed in master. It can't land in a release until a decision is made, because if we change it, you know.
Then once it lands, we're pretty much stuck with this one, and until we can get through a deprecation cycle. So.
Yeah, in terms
of how do we get to where we're having a conversation and making a decision? Should this be a separate issue, or should we do it in that issue, or should we set up a meeting? I mean, what's the path to like arrive at a decision on this?
I think a separate discussion issue would be good, where we can start collecting some ideas. If we are not working towards a resolution, then having a meeting specifically on this might be good. That's what I would recommend. I mean, I'm happy if others have other ideas.
I think okay. So what I'll do if no one objects, I'll take the TSC agenda label off of that item and add blocked, and I'll open a new issue summarizing what I think it is we need to decide, and I'll ping TSC, and James and Michael and Miles and anybody else can correct me if I've gotten it wrong.
Sounds reasonable.
Right. And you're kind of what I was going to say is we need somebody who's going to push it forward. Are you volunteering to do that, or?
No, I'm volunteering to open the issue, okay. But I'm not going to be the champion of this one. Okay. I think Miles might be a good person for that, but he's not here, so it's easy for me to volunteer him.
Okay, maybe Miles can be champion. So maybe just in the issue you open, you can ask him, pose that question, because I think we kind of need somebody who's going to champion it, right? I mean, the alternative is we just decide we're doing nothing at this point, right? Okay, so I've got actions that Rich is going to volunteer to create the separate issue. Maybe Miles can be the champion. Anything else we want to discuss on that one before we move on? Okay, so 22218 is the next one on the list, although I see that there was some discussion, and I think that one, was it actually removed? Let's just double check that. Yeah, it looks like it was removed from the agenda, so we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, that one was removed, and we have two proposals, 22218 and 21857, where we need to compare them and figure out with which approach we want to go. So that is just the next one coming up.
Right, okay. Move from agenda, right, you've already got the comment. Okay. So moving on to the next one then, util expose promise events 21857. Just gonna take a look unless anybody.
Okay, so that one's me, but okay. I'm like working on that other issue that I said I'd open just now. So okay. I'm struggling with the new GitHub template where I have to decide whether I need help with Node or found a problem with Node or what.
So you want me to come back to that one?
If we could come back to this one, that would be great.
Sure, will do. So moving on to the next one, 21766. Password hashing API, I think, and I'm just looking in the original issue because I think Chalker commented on that. 21857. Although if I got the right number there, no, sorry, 21766. If I could type correctly, it might actually show up. Right, so an update from Chalker, so there's no updates. He hopes to have an update by next week. So I think unless anybody else has something to add to that one, we'll move on. And the next one actually is 21351. So basically he says his comment was that he has filed 22584. So this is basically related to the runtime deprecate buffer constructor everywhere by default. So he's filed 22584 and would appreciate comments there. Any other comments, questions, thing to discuss on that one? No? Okay. So the next one is util expose promise events 21857. Again, just looking up who added that, unless anybody else jumps in.
This is the one that we were just Rich was just looking
Yeah,
at.
that's also me.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 21857 is so that's really okay, just part of the same one.
So yeah, so I can talk about that now if you want.
Okay, sure.
And both that, this one and the previous one. So the implementations are very similar. Well, have a lot of similarities, but ultimately, and we might want to loop in Benjamin Grunbaum and Gus maybe on this conversation. But ultimately, the decision that and Ruben too, perhaps, the question that Benjamin's distilled the question down to this, which is, should Node attempt to be as useful as possible and then ask people to opt out of features like warnings about, promises that have been resolved after they've been rejected and things like that? Or should Node attempt to be as configurable as possible and make the least assumptions about user code, and people should opt into instrumentation features? And so I'm not sure if this is something that would be delegatable to the diagnostics working group, if that's even appropriate, or how to proceed on this. But that's the question.
Right. So yeah, at this point we have two different APIs that are roughly doing the same thing. There are variances between them, and it really just comes down to kind of what similar to the feature detection thing. We have to kind of figure out how we want to do it, and then what we want to support over time. And then decide which one of these approaches we want to go with, or reconcile them into a kind of a third common approach, right? I don't know if we're going to be able to get clear resolution on that now without bringing, Gus and Ruben and Benjamin together into a call. So what I would like to suggest is that we actually schedule a call for this topic, and we try to get it hammered out. Now, the discussion between these individuals has not always been the most productive, because I think that there's just been a lot of contention in the conversation and what we're going to do here. So we want to, we should probably make sure that that we have some good conversation facilitation happening to make sure that we're able to make progress.
So I think they've done pretty good lately in. And I think there's much more agreement between them than difference at this point. I could be mistaken, but it seems like a lot of the contention has died down, which is nice. And Benjamin is probably a really good person to facilitate such a conversation. I've had a hard time nailing down whether a decision is wanted on these two PRs or whether a broader decision is wanted about the approach we should take. And I think they want a broader decision about, do we want to have people have to opt out of these types of things, or do we want people to have to opt into them? And basically make a decision, and then that will be the Node way, which I think might make sense, but I'm not sure.
I will say that as early as this morning, I was asked to decide one way or the other, and I think as far as the public conversation is concerned, there's not as much contention, but I still think that there's still either this or that thing happening that we need to work through. So I definitely think we still need to have a conversation on it. So a separate call, I think, would still be warranted.
Right. I mean, it's yeah. I can see if it's a this or that, like asking for the broader context is still means there's a fundamental disagreement that would help inform, right?
Yep.
I mean, it is, one approach is you try and basically figure out what we think people will need and make that default. The other one is like people have to discover it themselves. There are pros and cons to both for sure. So the next step, it sounds like the recommended for next meeting, what we need is somebody who's that sounds reasonable to me. Do we need somebody who can facilitate and set up that meeting?
I tried raising my hand and that failed completely.
Sorry.
We have to. We should raise hands when we're talking. I think I don't. It sounds like only the three of us have anything to say because there were some pauses in there. But just in case somebody else has something to say, we should use the raise hand feature before talking. I would want to know if this is something the diagnostics working group is this something that falls into their domain, or is this not something, like is a warning about a promise, is instrumentation and all that sort of thing, is that is that something that they would I got distracted there, that they would have opinions on and that would be relevant to diagnostics in general. Michael has his hand literally raised.
I can't actually raise my hand in the tool because I'm but the point I'd make is, like, I think actually if we just want what's the best answer in this case, involving the diagnostic working group makes sense to me. If we want what is the general approach to Node in terms of options going to be, that's actually, I think, a bit of a broader thing because it doesn't necessarily apply only to diagnostic options. It would apply to all sorts of options, right?
Yep.
So it's which of those two questions we think we want to answer would determine that, in my mind.
I'd like to, Jeremiah, I said you put in the chat here, I like good informative defaults. That's great, but I wanted to see if you could give a little more clarification on what that means in this particular case.
I mean, in this case, it probably means if there's something that you think the user might want to know about in a development scenario, particularly where they may be a first case user, then the program should say something rather than being silent.
Okay. Well, I think that's the kind of feedback we need, and just kind of lay that out on these API choices, and which one of these is actually gets us to those to that goal. All right. Because so far, I mean, yes, the conversation has gotten better. I think Benjamin's done a fantastic job of facilitating that and kind of breaking it down to, okay, what are the actual decisions that need to be made? But we still have these open PRs, and we still need this decision. Is it going to be one or the other or something else? Right. And I don't think we're getting closer to that particular discussion.
I don't think we need to figure out the PR issue, at least not right away. I think the broader issue is the one that we need to figure out right away. It's entirely possible that once. Well, anyway, yeah, I'm going to stop rambling. I typed in what I think we should do in the chat, which is have a separate meeting or a portion of the next meeting and invite Benjamin.
Yeah. So I think I agree with that, unless there's any objections. Like maybe if you open the issue, there's some discussion there. We put it on the agenda so that we talk about it in, or do people think it's big enough we should just try and schedule another full TSC meeting time?
I think we should have had my hand raised. We should try to make it part of the next meeting. And if it ends up just like blowing out the schedule and taking 45 minutes, then we still don't have an answer. Then schedule as a separate meeting. Let's do the least intrusive thing first. In fact, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open an issue and label it TSC agenda and remove the label from those two PRs and just mark them as blocked on that issue. And if it turns out that the entire TSC is in agreement that about the approach we should take, then we don't even need to have a meeting. We have agreement. If everybody agrees with Jeremiah that default should be to inform the user, then let's just do that.
Yep. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, any other discussion comments before we move on? No, okay. So the next issue under Node TSC is update the charter. So this is 569. I think, Rich, you were the originator of that, right?
Yes, and the only thing I want to say on this one is that before sending it to the board, I would love to have unanimity. I know I wrote in there that I wanted a majority of TSC people to thumbs up it. I would love to have unanimity, and here's why. Right now there are 13 of 18 of us who have endorsed it, if you include me. This fundamentally changes the way that management of the GitHub organization happens. It may not change it in practice, but well, it probably will. Anyway, the thing that this does, along with the corresponding changes to the community committee charter, is that instead of the TSC being the sole, having sole authority and responsibility over the GitHub organization, it is shared between the TSC and ComCom. Now, this is effectively what happens because of the GitHub management policy, but the TSC can declare that null and void at any time. With these charter changes, the community committee is on a full equal footing, and we can't take their authority away from them. Only the board can do that. And once we've gone down this path, it will be difficult or impossible to reverse it. I am in favor of this, as are apparently everybody else who's looked at it. But I don't want this to be something that sneaks in and is a surprise. I don't want, and in particular, I don't want to name names, but there are one or two people who have not commented or approved it, and I really want those people to have a say if they have a problem with this approach.
And just to be clear, this does not change any aspect of that existing GitHub organization management policy that's over in the admin repo. It just basically makes it more of an official stamp. Yeah.
Well, it means that the shared responsibility between ComCom and TSC comes from the board. Right now, TSC has authority over the GitHub org, and the TSC has chosen to share that authority with ComCom.
Yeah, but it
for
doesn't
example,
change the actual policy. It just says it's official, board recognized.
Yeah. So yeah, and well,
it changes where the authority for the policy comes from.
Yeah.
And I think that, like right now, for example, there's only 2 members of ComCom who have the owner role on the GitHub organization. And, like if right now someone said, ComCom argues that more people on ComCom, everybody on ComCom should have that role. The TSC has a lot of leverage to say no. I think that this will reduce leverage in situations like that.
Well,
and I don't have a problem with that, but I also don't want that to be something that happens, getting snuck in.
Yeah. So in terms of that, probably the one thing that I would like to see, or kind of more rigorously documented process for how someone becomes a member of the ComCom and then gets that commit bit or that owner bit. So I mean, that would kind of be my only ask there because of the potential security issues and ramifications around that. I mean, we've talked before about taking the owner privilege away from TSC members because of the security issue and just having more automation in place, right? So I think we need to make sure that we have a really good reason for making that a more liberal process, if that's what it's going to be. I hope that makes sense. I'm not,
So, but I think that's a separate, I mean, I think the point Rich was saying, if you feel strongly enough that the TSC needs to be able to impose that, then, you might want to object to this, right? Or like, because it's going to reduce the ability of the TSC to influence that decision.
Yeah, for me, it's not something that I would use it as a point of rejecting it. I would, because I signed off on this. Yeah. It's more that I think it needs to be a condition of approving this. If that makes sense.
I think you need to put that comment in the issue because it's going to get lost here.
Yeah, I think Rich's point is he's being extra careful that it doesn't just land. If there's things should happen first.
Okay, I'll add a comment right now.
And I guess, Rich, is it that we need an email to the rest of the people to say, please approve? Because if you want unanimity,
I'll email people, whether I email TSC or I email them privately.
Sure, yeah, one of the two, right? Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so any other discussion on this front before we move on? Okay, if not, there's the tracking. Next one is tracking issue for TC on board meetings. We don't have Miles, so I guess, oh no, we do. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong place. Yeah, we don't have Miles today, so I guess we'll skip that one. Miles, skipping. Okay, and then the last one is strategic initiatives. So tracking issue 423. Just gonna open that, get the list. Okay, so James, HTTP2.
HTTP2 is graduated from experimental in master. We haven't landed those PRs in release yet, so it hasn't gone stable in a release yet, but that should be coming soon. There's a couple of PRs that need to be to make sure that land with that, because if they don't, they become Semper Major. But other than that, I mean, yoo-hoo!
Okay, so that's going to go back to 10, I guess, initially, and
yeah, that'll go to 10. Is stable in 10, okay. And then once all the PRs make their way back to 8, we'll be able to put into 8 also.
Okay, so there is that was what I was just going to ask. Is there is a plan to backport it into 8 as well?
Yeah, it's a little more complicated because some of the fixes and stuff, I mean, need to be kind of reworked just a little bit, but but that will come. So it'll lag a little bit. But I honestly think now that it's out of experimental, we can probably take it off the strategic initiatives list.
Okay. So. If you want to PR that sounds reasonable. Yep. Okay, modules. Sorry, we don't have Miles, so we'll skip that one. NAPI. Still focus is on basically we're still putting together we put together the next milestone set of milestones, so you can actually go take a look at that if you want to see the specifics, but it's going to be focused on testing, evangelization, and some things to basically support adoption. We don't have Rod for OpenSSL evolution. I guess I haven't heard Anna, so I don't know. We don't have Anna for workers. We don't have Joey for error messages. So back to James on core promise APIs.
Core promise APIs is pretty much steady state right now. Don't want to push too hard on it until we get more validation that FS and DNS promises are what they should be, right? And that approach. So not a huge push on that yet. I'm thinking after 11 goes out the door, we'll work on it a little bit more.
Okay. After 11, may pick up.
And it really just comes down to making sure we're doing it right.
Yeah. So giving people basically time to comment on the experimental APIs and get experience and see, and then once we're comfortable, move on. Okay. Governance. We don't have Miles or Rod. New stream APIs. Jeremiah.
Yeah. So using the experimental sort of minimal pull streams, I have a working TCP socket. It's sort of experimental. Doesn't do everything, obviously, that node sockets do. But it's up there and it works. You can make HTTP requests over it if you want to. So that's there. I will send a link to that and post a link in the minutes. And also everyone, of course, relating to our interest in streams is kind of heavily discussing what we use streams at this time.
Okay. Okay. Okay, V8 currency. Do we have Michael? No, don't think we have Michael Zasso at the moment. Moving on. So async hooks. We don't have Ali, so we'll skip that one. And open web standards, we don't have Miles. Okay, so that covers the review of strategic initiatives. And that gets us to the end of our scheduled agenda items. Are there any other things people want to add in or discuss?
I just want to say much respect to Franzi for attacking the agenda to make sure that it was as lean and representative and ready to go as it could be.
Yep, I will echo that. Many thanks.
I will just make note, we are making progress on the process binding to internal binding. Lots of pull requests have moved to that. Now, part of that was this interim step of this kind of fall through, right, where things that are moved to internal binding will still work with process binding. At some point, we will need to add a deprecation in there to get people to stop using process binding, but it's going to take a long time, and we need folks just kind of focused and paying attention on that. Part of that deprecation process may be introducing new APIs to support some of those use cases for why people are using process binding in the first place. And there may need to be some difficult conversations about what we need to add or what we don't think it should be added. So just to ask folks to be paying attention to that and engaging in those conversations.
Right. Is there a good way, like, as opposed to trying to follow all the different PRs and stuff like that, is there somewhere that focuses that discussion?
There is a tracking issue for tracking the actual progress of those individual PRs. But to be honest, we won't know all of the uses that may be impacted until we actually start introducing the runtime deprecation and we start seeing who screams.
Right. So, but I guess I'm just like suggesting, like, is it that, if we can give people that link, that's the link to sort of pay attention to what's going on, or?
Yeah, the tracking issue is probably the closest thing we have right now.
Do you have the link handy? I can paste that in a minute. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Jeremiah, was that an error in the chat, or were you trying to interject something?
No, that's the link. I was having trouble actually copy pasting on my computer into Zoom chat.
But you nailed it.
Oh, shoot, that's private. Why is this set to private? Sorry, Rich, I just sent you a private instead.
Sometimes it seems to just default to private somehow. So
yeah, it's weird. Okay, so
okay.
I just put the link there.
Added into minutes. Please follow. I'm just gonna say please follow tracking issue. Okay. Any other issues? Okay, let's take a quick look to see if there's any questions on the stream. Does anybody have that handy?
Yeah, I solicited for questions, but there haven't been any.
Okay, so I guess we can assume there's no questions this week. No questions this week. Okay, so I think we will call that for the meeting today. And if everybody can stick around for the short private session, I'm just going to stop the stream.